So and I was saying that, I think you had to add that anyway, because otherwise a lot of the other arguments that he gives won't go through because they have to assume that there's a low entropy pass that makes a difference to things like, action and so on. So I'm not 100% sure about that, but that's, so I think David needed this anyway, in order to give the arguments for, let's say, why we can affect the future but not the past. If these arguments were good, he needed to assume that there was a low entropy past in the not too distant past.
If that's a law, if it's a law that the low entropy past is in the not too distant past, then you've got a problem.
Well, I don't know whether that should be I don't know whether that was a jump.
Okay.
That had to be added as a law.
So what's added as a law is that the initial state was low entropy, right? But if we add that the initial state is in the recent past, then the laws are only going to hold for a very short period at the beginning of the universe, right? That seems to be a problem.
It doesn't seem to be a candidate for being a law at all. So it seems as though something needs to get added to the package, which isn't a law. And one of the things that I was talking about to Barry is, so Barry has argued that, right, we know that, and I've been involved in this argument, whether prob and past have to be laws because, well, we need them to ground the law-likeness of the laws of the special sciences, ergo their laws. But if it turns out we need this third thing or fourth thing added to the package, namely our present location in the history of the universe, and that clearly doesn't seem to be a law, then that might refute the argument that anything that grounds the law-likeness of the special sciences has to itself be a law.
Right, so I guess one question is whether we think of these laws of special sciences as the sort of thing that hold throughout the whole history of the universe. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how to think about that. Does good money, bad money drives out good money? Does that hold?
No, well, it certainly doesn't hold in the still universe.
I mean, maybe it still does, because, we're talking about, it's really good money in such and such circumstances, and such and such circumstances. That's really what the generalization is.
Right.
And maybe once you get all of that, then you don't need the past hypothesis to get this. Whenever you have that state, it's likely you'll get whatever the future state is if this is a lawful generalization. So it's not obvious to me that you actually need the past hypothesis for those generalizations. So buying that the David program is working, which might be parties to our conversation might not want to buy that, under the assumption that we're in this sort of time from the very early universe of low entropy, but way before equilibrium. So suppose that this program worked before we started worrying about what happens post-equilibrium.
Yeah, I just wonder then what's the status of that thing that you need to add.
Right.
Yeah.
So the claim was, though, if you needed to add that for some of the other arguments, not the arguments for getting the special science laws, but for arguments for getting why it is that we're able to have knowledge of the past by our records, but not knowledge of the future by things that look like records. So you need it for that, and maybe for the asymmetry of action of influence arguments. Supposing they went through, I don't see that you need it, though, for the special science generalizations, if they were working before.
No, I don't think you're making the right point, Barry. I mean,
That could well be so.
no, the thing is, it's quite true what you're saying, but if you didn't have things like Boltzmann's brains, and Boltzmann's brains is the extreme example, then the only people that would be worth talking, that there would be there to talk about would be in this initial period. And so you're automatically in the initial period. You don't have to worry about any further stipulation that you care about these people in the initial period. Now, as soon as you have non-initial period people and they dominate, then you have to deal with that problem. Now, and I do agree that what I find striking about the Boltzmann-Bain problem is it does make it force. Nino and I would put this in terms, Maradi, I suppose, too, in terms of primitive ontology of theory, what theory is fundamentally about. It was almost what David said 2 days ago, although David would never like to talk about primitive ontology, but he was almost doing that. He said, well, look, that's the kind of story we have in mind for the theory is one in which we're in the initial segment. Well, the kind of story we have in mind in theory, that the theory, that we want to make contact with us in the initial, the people in the initial segment. That, another way of saying that for us would be that the part of the primitive ontology of theory is that the stuff in the initial segment is the stuff that you really want to make contact with. Now, what's different about that than usual situation where you would appeal to the primitive ontology, say it's particles or instead of this, that, and the other, is that it's the same kind of stuff that you'd have later on, it's just that the time is special. Now that's kind of a novel situation. So I think the thing is interesting.
How is that related to what I said? I think, I agree with what you, as I understood you, Shelley, you were saying the Boltzmann brain problem isn't the problem for this account. Because
If you, but I don't think, I think you dismissed it too quickly.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I was thinking, when I had never thought about personally, it was there to think about, but I never thought about before I read Schwartzman. And then I see that he goes out of his way to solve this problem. Okay. John does.
Yeah, he wants to get rid of it entirely.
He wants to get rid of it.
And so he can
And
deal
has, you know,
things in a
and his
somewhat
way,
conventional
It
way.
made me think like, you know, like it looked to me like something like you have a problem with mice, and so you invite tigers into your house to kill the mice, and, you know, because this is just, you know.
No, I don't have that same, I have the sense that the problem is more interesting than you
Okay,
do.
no, I'm not saying it's not interesting. I'm just saying.
And that,
there's-
I find it, I do think if you really, I mean, it's not as, I think what Tim said is also right. I'm worried about it. I don't think it's as great as it sounds, though. I'm worried about the problem and as being not so great, because as Tim would say, look, you have this problem, just like everything ends at a certain time, then you don't have the problem anymore. You might say, well, that's a kind of ugly theory. So
It's a lot simpler than.
but it's a lot simpler. So you say, okay, I have this theory and everything. Oh, let me see. Let's let it not end. Let's just let it continue. That's even simpler theory. You say, no, that's no good, because then you have these brains. But then you should, we're developing later on. But makes it seem a little bit strange that you should be worrying about that. You made the theory better. Now, why should you be worse off? It gives you the feeling that maybe your methodological principles aren't right here. And you should then ask yourself, what the hell's going on? And then maybe what you tell yourself, what's really going on is I really cared about the first part. And that's an identification of maybe what the primitive ontology theory was to begin with. Something we don't usually take into account, because the primitive ontology is not a simple physical thing, but it's something which goes beyond the physical, beyond the metaphysical, but has to do with the relation of the theory to us, the kind of story it tells us, the role the theory plays for us.
So, okay, so you agree, just to make one thing about it, so you agree that, a response to this issue is to say, look, all we care about is the theory working in this initial segment.
Yeah, yeah.
And that seems to me to be right too. And a way in which, if the David's project was formulate the physical theory which will ground our beliefs about the past and the future, to the extent the physical theory can do that, then he needs to make sure the assumption that we're not so far from the past, and in fact, all the evidence points in that direction. So, okay, anyway, so that's the first thing. Now the question is, and what Eric was pursuing, is that really damaging to David's project? I don't think anything you said made me think it was.
But